Welcome to the lost love mystery where things aren't always as simple as they seem. Sometimes, what appears to be an innocent visit, a quiet moment, or just a familiar face at the door can hide something much darker, something far more dangerous. My story begins when my neighbor's son showed up at my door, unannounced, with a hidden agenda. I never imagined that one small decision would unravel everything I thought I knew about trust, safety, and the quiet life I led. Brace yourself. The lines between friend and foe aren't always clear, and sometimes, the truth is the hardest thing to face. I never thought my life would unravel like this. Looking back, the signs were always there. Silent warnings I chose to ignore. But sometimes, life blindsides you, leaving you gasping for clarity in the wreckage of your own choices. My name is Ariana Lewis, and I am 42 years old. I live alone in a quiet, unassuming neighborhood. My world has been a solitary one for the most part. Work, home, repeat. The humdrum routine of survival. The only person who ever truly disrupted that stillness was Noah Carter, my neighbor's son. Noah had always been around, ever since he was a little boy trailing behind his father, Ethan, like a shadow. Ethan was a good man, hard-working and dependable. But he was often away, night shifts at the factory, weekends picking up extra jobs. Over time, Noah began spending more time with me. I became a surrogate aunt of sorts, someone he could talk to when life grew heavy. But nothing could have prepared me for that night. The night when everything shifted. It was mid-December, and the cold had seeped into every corner of my small home. The heater groaned but did little to fight the icy air. Noah stopped by unexpectedly, his face pale, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Hey Ariana," he greeted softly, his voice frayed with weariness. "You look like you've been running a marathon," I said, offering a small smile. "Long day." He gave a tired nod and dropped onto the couch with a sigh. "Yeah. Exams, work. Everything. I feel like my brain's fried." "Well, you're in luck," I said, walking toward the kitchen. "I made some hot chocolate earlier. Let me heat it up." He smiled faintly, his eyes grateful. Moments like these were familiar, almost comforting. Noah had always been more than just a neighbor's son. He was the quiet presence that reminded me I wasn't completely alone. After he drank the hot chocolate, he sat back against the cushions and closed his eyes. I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers twitched slightly as if still scrolling through mental notes from the day's chaos. "You know," I said gently, "if you need to rest for a bit, you can lie down. The couch is yours." He hesitated, opening one eye. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing, Noah," I assured him. "Go on. Rest. You need it." He exhaled slowly and stretched out, pulling the blanket over himself. I dimmed the lights and sat down in the armchair across from him. Outside, the wind howled softly against the windows, a melancholic lullaby for the weary. Minutes passed. Noah's breathing slowed into a steady rhythm. I watched his chest rise and fall, feeling a strange mix of protectiveness and unease. It was probably the exhaustion on his face that made my heart ache. Or perhaps the loneliness that mirrored my own. But then, he stirred. I assumed he was adjusting for comfort, but he turned toward me instead. Half asleep, his brow furrowed as though caught in some internal battle. His breathing quickened. Then, without warning, his hand stretched out, grasping my wrist with surprising firmness. "Ariana," he murmured. His voice was fragile, childlike. I froze. His palm was hot against my skin, contrasting with the cold air around us. My instinct was to pull away, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the vulnerability etched into his features. Or perhaps it was the hollow ache of my own solitude. "It's okay," I whispered, covering his hand with mine. "I'm here." He exhaled a shaky breath, and his grip loosened. I thought he'd drift back into sleep, but instead, he shifted again, closer this time. His head rested against my knee, and his hand slid down, his fingers curling lightly around mine. My heart raced. The room seemed to shrink, the shadows pressing in with a suffocating weight. I told myself it was innocent. Noah had sought comfort here for years. This was no different. But it was different. The warmth of his breath against my skin, the tremble in his fingers as he clung to my hand. It was a familiarity laced with something foreign. He stirred again, his eyes fluttering open. They met mine with a clarity that sent a chill down my spine. His pupils dilated, his expression unreadable. The silence between us thickened. "You okay?" I asked softly. His gaze didn't waver. "Yeah. I didn't mean to. I just needed to feel safe." The word hit me like a punch to the chest. Safe. That was all this was. A young man, exhausted and adrift, seeking refuge in familiar arms. I tried to believe it. I squeezed his hand and offered a reassuring smile. "You are safe, Noah. Always." He closed his eyes again and shifted back toward the couch, letting go of my hand. My skin burned where his fingers had been. I stood, retreating to the kitchen, needing distance to breathe. I poured water into a glass with trembling hands. The silence felt deafening now, each second stretching like an unspoken question hanging in the air. I wanted to dismiss it as a fleeting moment of confusion. But deep down, I knew something had shifted between us. And there was no turning back. The next morning arrived like a fragile thread of light through thick fog. I barely slept, my mind stuck on that moment when Noah's hand grasped mine, the warmth of it lingering long after he left. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself it was all innocent. Exhaustion. Vulnerability. Nothing more. But the unease remained. As I sipped my coffee, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ethan, Noah's father, standing on the porch. His usual easy smile was absent. "Morning, Ariana," he greeted, his eyes scanning my face. "Noah mentioned he was here last night. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a smile. He was exhausted. Fell asleep on the couch. "That's all." Ethan nodded but didn't look convinced. "He's been off lately. Quiet. Distracted. Thought maybe he said something to you." I shook my head. "Nothing out of the ordinary. Just school and work stress, I think." He exhaled, running a hand through his graying hair. "If you notice anything weird, let me know, okay? I worry about him." The conversation lingered with me long after Ethan left. I wanted to believe Noah's behavior was just a phase. But my gut said otherwise. That evening, Noah texted me, "Can I come over?" My heart skipped. I hesitated before typing, "Sure." He arrived within minutes, wearing a black hoodie and jeans, his eyes shadowed but alert. I forced a casual tone as I greeted him. "Hey, stranger. Rough day." "Yeah," he muttered, stepping inside. He looked around as if searching for something familiar. Or maybe, for me. We sat on the couch in silence for a while. The ticking clock on the wall sounded unnaturally loud. Finally, he spoke. Did I make you uncomfortable last night?" If you're enjoying the twists and turns of this story, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Like the video if you're hooked so far, and feel free to share it with anyone who loves a good mystery. I'd love to know your thoughts. Comment below and let me know what you think is really going on with my neighbor's son. Is there more to his visit than meets the eye? Your feedback helps shape the story as we continue. I flinched inwardly. "No, Noah. You were just tired. That's all." He studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I don't think it was just that." The air thickened. My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" He shifted closer. "I don't know. It felt different. Didn't it?" I stood, retreating toward the kitchen under the pretense of grabbing water. "Noah, you're just stressed. We both are. Let's not overthink it." Footsteps followed me. His voice, soft yet insistent, broke the fragile normalcy. "I'm not imagining it, Ariana. I know you felt it too." I turned around sharply, nearly colliding with him. This isn't okay, I said, voice trembling. His jaw tensed. I don't know why, but I can't stop thinking about it. About you. Silence. Cold, unrelenting silence. Noah, go home, I whispered. He hesitated, his eyes filled with a mix of confusion and longing. But he obeyed, turning away without another word. When the door clicked shut, I slid to the floor, my pulse thundering in my ears. I thought distance would break the spell. I was wrong. Days passed, each one weighed down by an invisible tension. I tried to convince myself that Noah's words were nothing more than misplaced emotions, confusion from exhaustion, loneliness, or perhaps the chaos of young adulthood. But the truth clung to me like frost on glass. I saw it every time I looked in the mirror, the tightness in my eyes, the way my breath caught whenever I heard footsteps outside my door. Noah didn't come over after that night. But I felt his presence everywhere. The way his gaze lingered across the driveway when I stepped outside, the faint shadow of his hoodie in the corner of my eye when I returned home late. Then, one evening, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. I opened the door, half expecting Noah. Instead, it was Ethan. "Hey, Ariana," he said, forcing a smile. "Sorry to bother you again." "No bother," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. He didn't move. His eyes shifted over my shoulder as if searching for someone. "Is Noah here?" he asked. The question landed like ice water on my skin. "Here? No. I haven't seen him." Ethan's brows furrowed. "He left the house 3 hours ago. Said he needed some air." I figured. His voice trailed off. Panic fluttered in my chest. "I'll call him." I dialed Noah's number. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. "He's been acting strange," Ethan muttered. "Distant. And last night, he was talking about, I don't know, how everything's connected. How sometimes people are drawn to each other in ways they don't understand." My breath caught. "Did he say anything to you?" Ethan asked, his eyes sharp now. I forced a shake of my head. "No. Just normal stuff. Exams. Work. Nothing like that." Ethan exhaled and rubbed his temples. "I'll go look for him." As he left, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing. My phone buzzed in my hand. One new message from Noah. I opened it. "I'm outside." The words made the room tilt. I moved toward the living room window and peered through the curtain. Across the street, standing beneath the flickering glow of a street lamp, was Noah. Hood pulled low, hands in his pockets, head slightly tilted upward, as if he were waiting for me to see him. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped onto the porch. The night air was sharp and unforgiving. "Noah," I called softly. He stepped into the beam of light. His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked on mine. "You told me to go home," he said. "But you knew I wouldn't stay away." This isn't right," I said, wrapping my arms around myself. He took a step forward. "You feel it too. Don't pretend you don't." My legs trembled. "You're confused. I'm your neighbor. I've known you since you were a child." "That's not what this is," he said, voice low. "We both know it." I shook my head. "Go home, Noah. Please." His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might argue. But he turned and walked away without another word. I went back inside, locked every door, and sat on the couch in the dark. Outside, the wind howled. But beneath it, I swore I could hear footsteps pacing on the sidewalk. The night after Noah appeared beneath the street lamp, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt like a presence pressing against the walls. By morning, exhaustion blurred the edges of reality. I sipped cold coffee at the kitchen table, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Noah was just a young man, confused and searching for meaning in all the wrong places. The doorbell shattered the quiet. My stomach knotted as I walked to the door. I opened it cautiously. It was Ethan. His face was pale, eyes sunken with worry. "He's missing," he said, voice cracking. "What?" My breath caught. "Noah," Ethan rasped. "He didn't come home last night. I've been driving around town, calling everyone. Nothing." My mind raced. "Maybe he just needed space," I suggested, forcing a calm tone. Ethan rubbed his temples. "Maybe. But last night before he left, he was saying strange things. Talking about connections. How people are tied together by invisible threads." I froze. Those were Noah's words when he stood beneath the street lamp. "Let me know if you hear from him," Ethan said, handing me a card with his number. I closed the door and leaned against it. My phone buzzed before I could catch my breath. Unknown number. Come to the old train station. Alone. Midnight. My heart stuttered. I knew it was him. The old train station had been abandoned for years, a rusted skeleton of forgotten journeys. By midnight, fog coiled around the tracks like a ghostly veil. I parked my car and stepped into the cold. "Noah," I called, my voice swallowed by the night. A figure emerged from the shadows. "Noah." His eyes glinted in the dim moonlight. "You came," he said softly. "Why are we here?" My voice trembled. He stepped closer. "This is where everything becomes clear." I backed away. "Noah, your father is worried. You need to go home." "I can't go back," he said, his tone almost pleading. "Not after what I feel." The air thickened. His pupils were wide, his breath shallow. I took another step backward. "This connection. You feel it too," Noah whispered. "No," I said firmly. "I don't." "You're lying." His face contorted with something between hurt and anger. "Noah, I'm leaving," I said, turning toward the car. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron. "We belong together," he said through clenched teeth. "Let me go," I demanded. He didn't move. I twisted my arm, breaking free, and sprinted to my car. The engine roared to life just as he slammed his fists against the window. His eyes locked on mine, wild and unrecognizable. I reversed, tires screeching against the gravel. Noah stood there, watching as I sped away. When I reached home, I double-locked every door and collapsed onto the couch, shaking. This was no longer confusion or misplaced affection. This was obsession. The hours after my escape from the train station blurred into one long, suffocating nightmare. I sat in the living room, lights off, phone gripped in my hand. I should have called the police. I should have called Ethan. But I didn't. Instead, I sat frozen, ears straining for the faintest sound from outside. At 3:27 a.m., the doorbell rang. My pulse spiked. I stood slowly, heart rattling in my chest. I crept to the peephole and peered through. No one was there. I turned away, breath shuddering. Then the door handle jiggled. My body went cold. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ethan. "Hello." His voice was groggy. "Ethan," I whispered. "Noah's here. At my door." A pause. Then, "What?" "I think he followed me home." "He?" The front door creaked. The lock twisted. "He's coming in," I hissed into the phone. "Get somewhere safe." "I'm on my way." I sprinted toward the bedroom and locked the door just as footsteps crossed the threshold. My heart hammered as I crouched beside the bed, phone still in my hand. The footsteps were slow, measured. "Noah, please leave," I called, voice cracking. Silence. Then, a whisper from the other side of the door. "You shouldn't have run." The doorknob rattled. My vision tunneled. I searched the room for something. Anything to defend myself. My eyes landed on the heavy ceramic lamp on the nightstand. "Noah, your dad is coming. Please go home." "No," he said softly. "This is where I belong." The lock clicked. The door opened. He stepped into the room, silhouetted by the hallway light. His face was calm, eyes dark and empty. "Stay back," I said, lamp raised. He tilted his head. I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to stop pretending. Stop running. The sound of tires screeching outside shattered the moment. Ethan. Noah. Ethan's voice roared from the front door. Where are you? Noah's expression shifted. The spell broke. I swung the lamp with all my strength. It shattered against his shoulder. He staggered back, cursing. I bolted past him, sprinting into the hallway. Ethan was already there, a metal flashlight in his grip. Noah lunged toward me, but Ethan swung the flashlight with a guttural yell. It connected with a sickening crack. Noah crumpled to the floor. Ethan dropped the flashlight and rushed to me. Are you hurt? I shook my head, trembling. We both looked down at Noah. His chest heaved with shallow breaths, his eyes fluttering open. He stared at me. I just wanted to be close, he whispered. The police arrived minutes later. They restrained Noah, who didn't resist, his gaze never leaving me. As they led him to the squad car, he turned his head and mouthed, "This isn't over." Ethan wrapped an arm around me as I collapsed into silent sobs. The nightmare was over. Or so I thought. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. From an unknown number. I'll find you, Ariana. Nothing can keep us apart. The end.